I've been here at the university for almost 30 years. I have been in research for my whole existence here at UK. What got me really interested in the biobanking was I was working for a researcher in cardiac diseases, and we wanted to get human tissue. There was nothing to be found, basically, in the United States. So we actually had to go through a collaborator in Hungary, and trying to get an IRB written so that you could bring in samples from another country, let alone another continent, was very, very difficult. So when I saw that this position was coming up, I jumped at this opportunity because I do have a passion for making sure that people can do research.
Biobank is a collection of tissue, biological material, samples that would otherwise be discarded if they weren't being saved for research. There's no new tissue being taken. We can learn a lot about how the body works by looking at animals, but sometimes things that we learn in animals don't work exactly the same way in humans. Having a biobank with human samples in it is going to allow us to test things directly on human tissue.
For every great discovery, an investigator probably has at least 10 or a dozen ideas that didn't work. And so you're always trying out things. Gee, I wonder if this is true. Oh, it's not. Okay, let's move on to something else. So this provides a ready source of tissues, of samples, where you can test out some novel ideas, and you don't have to submit your own IRB. You don't have to start from scratch to do this. Grant proposals are almost never funded if you just say, I've got an idea, please fund me for this idea. No. You really have to have something already there. And so having some tissue where you can test out your hypotheses and at least have some preliminary data helps the grant proposal considerably.
The Marquee Cancer Centre has been collecting cancer-related samples for probably a couple of decades. The Sanders Brown Centre in Aging has an extremely important international level resource with the brain biobank. But what we haven't had until the last few years is a more general collection that's got a bigger variety of tissue, which is really going to allow more researchers on campus to be able to start using human biospecimens in their work. The great thing that the CCTS does for biobanking is it provides a framework that allows us to integrate the efforts of lots of individuals. CCTS has the ability to bring physicians, other healthcare providers, together with basic scientists to have a very integrated approach to research that's focused on patient care.
We started gathering together our regulatory people, our legal people, and our investigators to try to figure out what would work best. We determined that we need not only samples, but we needed the information connected to the samples. If someone gave me 100 blood samples from diabetics, but I know I can find out nothing about these diabetics. Are their blood sugars high or low? Do they have kidney disease? Do they have eye disease? Do they have heart disease? Tell me more about these people. If you can't give people that, then the samples really aren't worth very much. So we had to link it to the information. And we determined we needed to have an opt-in consenting process. If somebody says, yes, you may use my tissue, so we have to also have an electronic signature of this so that we can make this determination quickly and easily.
We started consenting patients in November 2013, and we've consented approximately 10,000 patients. A little over 80% of the patients that we asked to participate in the program choose to join, so we're really excited about that. It shows that we're doing something that's got broad support from the community. UK healthcare sees at least 1 million patients a year. We have lots of opportunities to build this program. Ultimately, we hope to enroll in every UK healthcare facility. So we've spent a lot of time developing the infrastructure to actually collect samples. Gail Sievert is our primary tissue collector.
I am sort of like the liaison between the operating room and pathology for collecting samples for research. When I contact them and say, so-and-so has consented for biobanking, they know who I am and they know that I can be trusted with their samples.
She's going into the operating room, she's collecting tissue samples from surgeries. Gail takes that tissue to pathology. The pathologists will look at the tissue, decide if it can be discarded without impacting patient care.
And then they'll tell me whether there is bankable tissue whether it's tumor or normal or both. Then I prepare tubes for them, and they give me small amounts of tissue. We want to get them frozen as quickly as possible because as tissues sit outside of the body, they deteriorate.
And then she'll bring them up to the 5th floor of the medical school where we've got banks of very cold freezers that we can store the tissues in indefinitely.
The histology is not all that time sensitive. It doesn't really matter whether the tissue gets down to pathology in 10 minutes or 3 hours in most cases. So it often sits around. But for research, you often want to look at RNA, proteins. You might want to keep the cells alive and culture for a while. So it's much more time sensitive. The sample gets from the operating room into the lab very quickly so that we can actually do things that we couldn't have even dreamed of doing before.
I think my background has been a great asset, not just in how to treat the tissues, but knowing what are some of the things that will be used in the future and how they'll be used. I hope that it gives them confidence that when they get tissues from the collection, that they're going to get the best quality tissues. That has been one of my biggest goals, is quality.